So without further ado, we'd like to welcome him to the stage, and thank you very much for coming all the way from the US.
Warm welcome. You guys are a noisy bunch, aren't you? There are thousands of people here. All right. So we're going to try to give an overview of the advances in nutritional science that dictate to us how we can live to be 100 years old and not have heart attacks, not have strokes, not get demented, and not get cancer. So we have a unique opportunity in human history to be able to utilize nutritional science and these advances with a better, happier, and more healthier life than ever before. But nobody's taking advantage of this. It's crazy. It's like you can smoke 3 packs of cigarettes, right? And we're going to look a day for 60 years. We're going to look for a magic pill to allow you to smoke and not get lung cancer. Is that going to happen? Of course not. It's not a fantasy. It's not a fairy tale. You have to not smoke if you want not to get lung cancer. And we have the answer right now to not get breast cancer or prostate cancer too. But people don't like the answer. They don't like what they're being told. They're looking for some magic instead. Right? It's not magic. It takes a little effort, but the effort gives us a tremendous benefit. And it's our obligation to tell people that drugs like blood pressure medications and cholesterol medications increase your risk of cancer. That taking medications are not just let me say this a different way. Nutritional excellence is not only 100 times more effective than conventional medical care for preventing heart attacks and strokes. It's also that conventional medical care, not just not effective, it also increases the risk of cancer because the cells are carcinogens. And people aren't told that. All right, let's get started. So, the theme of the presentation, of course, is that these diseases that afflict the modern world don't have to happen. They're not natural. They're not the inevitable consequence of aging. We didn't see these cancers occur in earlier times, in early human history. And we don't see them in the wild kingdom either when animals live unnaturally. And you don't see overweight animals running around the jungles and the woods either. So we really have what I'm saying is that when we eat natural foods, our body becomes highly disease resistant. And we're talking about this basic principle of eating a diet that's rich in micronutrients with more moderate amount of macronutrients. So macronutrients are those nutrients that contain calories, fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Water is also a macronutrient, right? So today we're talking mostly about the caloric containing macronutrients, fat, carbohydrate, and protein. And the first thing I'm saying about them is that the more macronutrients you eat in life, the shorter your lifespan. Did you say that again? Well, let me say it a different way, okay? I'm going to say right now, this is the first principle of the Nutritarian diet, and this part I want you to memorize. Because the most proven methodology to slow aging and extend human lifespan is this. Moderate caloric restriction in an environment of micronutrient excellence. Micronutrients are those food components that do not contain calories, like vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals that are necessary for normal cellular function and normal function of our immune system. Without a diet rich in phytochemicals, you do not have a normal immune system. Let me say that in a different way. That as a primate, we're designed to function with green vegetables as a foundational food in our diet. That means our body is designed to be eating a lot of green vegetables. And if you're not going to eat a lot of green vegetables, then you can't be normal. You follow that? You don't have a normal immune system if you're not eating a lot of green vegetables. And you're going to have some problem arise in your health. So what's the food you guys think over here has the closest association with prevention against dementia? So people who eat that food have the lowest amount of dementia compared to eating any other food. What do you think the vegetable is? What food that is? No. It's green vegetables. It's leafy green vegetables, particularly leafy green cruciferous vegetables. So what do you guys in the middle think? What do you think the food that's most closely associated with lower rates of atherosclerosis, clean blood vessels, freedom from heart attack, retaining elasticity as you age, preventing the stiffening of the blood vessels with aging? People who eat this most food have the most elastic and youthful blood vessels without atherosclerosis. What do you think their food is? Green. Oh my God. What about the food that's most protective against cancer? What are the food you're going to eat that's going to be most protective against breast and prostate cancer? Sorry. What do you think it is? Right. And of course, the foods with the highest micronutrient density are green vegetables. Of course, we're a green vegetable-dependent animal. If you don't like green vegetables, you better live close to a good hospital. But in any case, I'm going to repeat what I said one more time, just to make sure you got it. Or I should ask you to repeat it, one of you to repeat it. The first principle of the Nutritarian diet is moderate caloric restriction in an environment of micronutrient excellence. Did you get that? Now here's the thing. Micronutrient excellence naturally makes you desire less calories. The reason people can't control their appetite and have to overeat because they're not focused on the nutritional quality of what they put in their mouth, and because they develop ubiquitously across the modern world micronutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies, they have unrelenting cravings to overeat calories. I'm going to talk about a little bit about that tonight. The science via which you're forced to consume more calories than your body needs when you don't meet your micronutrient needs. So I'm not only saying it's important to moderately undereat, I'm also saying the method in which you moderately undereat comfortably is by eating a diet with a high amount of high nutrient plant foods. You follow that? Because I'll just give you an example before we start the lecture, okay? Let's say I had a buffet at the front of the room, right? And you guys, this half of the room, was going to make a line up to the buffet and fill your place with food while scientists were going to measure what you were eating and weigh it and discern how many calories you consumed, and they're going to figure out how much calories you ate in that meal. Now, while you were waiting online, I gave you a tablespoon of olive oil, just to moderate your appetite a little bit as you're waiting online to get your food. And they would find that whether you had the olive oil or not, you would still consume the same amount of calories in the meal because the olive oil, because no fiber associated with it, and because it's absorbed into the bloodstream so rapidly, it won't lessen the appetite. It won't turn down the appetite. So now you would have eaten 120 calories more because you had a tablespoon of olive oil before you got to the buffet. You got that? Now you guys, of course, didn't get the olive oil. You got an apple to eat online on the way to the buffet. And the apple of 65 calories does have fiber and micronutrient and water content and occupies space in the stomach. And so you guys, the scientists, discerned, they figured out that you ate 65 calories less food on the average on a buffet because you had an apple while you were waiting in line. You following this so far? Now here's the thing though. What if I didn't give you the olive oil when you waited in line? What if I mixed the olive oil in with the food? I put the oil in the salad, in the rice, in the vegetable dish, the extra 120 calories. Now how many extra calories will you consume in that meal? What do you think? Take a guess. What? 200, that's right. How'd you know? Oh, whoever said that said the correct answer, because you would not only take in the extra 120 calories from the tablespoon of olive oil, but because the oil ratchets up the appetite, makes you want to eat more food, you would have consumed 80 calories more on the average from the food itself that's not oil in the meal. Did you follow that? Now what if instead of giving olive oil or an apple, or instead of almond oil or sesame oil, I gave sesame seeds or an almond or a walnut? What if I gave some nuts to eat? Or I mixed the nuts in with the meal, or I gave the nuts on them? Then what would happen? Well, because the fat calories from the nuts are digested in a 3 to 4 hour period, the calories only go to the bloodstream about 1 or 2 calories a minute, not 30 to 40 calories a minute. Follow that? And because they're so rich in sterols and stanols and fibers that bind fat, you get the feeling like you ate the full 100 calories. But all those calories don't get absorbed into the bloodstream. In other words, they shut down the appetite by 120 calories. You came and you ate the meal and you ate less food. But the 120 calories never actually entered into the bloodstream. Because the sterols and stanols that bind fat carry a portion of those calories out into the toilet. All the fat in nuts and seeds are not biologically available to the body. So it shuts down the appetite of the full amount you ate. But then it moderates your calories by making you feel like you ate that many calories, not want to eat more food, but then you don't really absorb and digest that many calories. The same thing with beans. When you eat beans, you felt like you ate 200 calories of beans, but because there's so much resistant starch calories in beans, the resistant starch calories are broken down by bacteria in the gut, turned into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, but the bacteria that convert it into the fat, creating more stool fat, that conversion takes place so far down in the digestive tract, so the distal part of the large intestine and the proximal part of the small intestine, I said it wrong, the distal part of the small intestines, the proximal part of the large intestines, right? That 90% of those calories are lost, and when you felt like you ate 200 calories in beans, and you shut your appetite down by 200 calories, it's absorbed slowly about 3 to 4 hours, and you feel like eating for hours and hours, but you don't really absorb all those calories, so it moderately, naturally, calorically restricts you. But there's one other thing you should recognize here. Because not only that the nuts and seeds you didn't get all those calories in, it's also that the sterols and stanols and the fibers in nuts and seeds bind fat so tightly that they actually suck fat out of the bloodstream. In other words, the serum from the bloodstream goes through the capillaries in the villi of the small intestines, and the blood travels in both of the fluid, or you should say body fluids, right? Serum in the blood travels in both directions. The body is able to, the nuts and seeds are able to take out oxidized LDL and saturated fat and put more fat in the stool that wasn't the same fat that was originally in nut and seed. Some of those fats came in and other fats came out. You following this now? That's some of the mechanisms via which nuts and seeds lower LDL and lower oxidized LDL. It actually moves saturated fat and oxidized LDL and helps you transfer fat into the digestion. So food has therapeutic properties that's generally not recognized. But let's get back to the lecture here, okay? Because we're talking here about, I want to give that example on how eating right moderately calorically restricts you, right? Because not all food is absorbable and biologically, and calories are not biologically available. You need a diet that's the right type of diet. It naturally has you desire less food, and it actually has you shut down the appetite, and also all the calories aren't absorbed. Like raw vegetables. You get raw carrots compared to cooked carrots. The raw carrots are not all absorbable, because a lot of the fibers are going to pass through you and carry the calories with them. You eat more cooked carrots or cooked sweet potato compared to raw, then you get more calories to be absorbed. So when you eat a diet with the right design, it makes it almost impossible to become overweight. So the first principle of Nutrient diet is what? I've said it about 3 times already. So the first principle of the Nutrient diet, the first principle of the Nutrient diet, please, one of you volunteer, is what? What was that?
Moderate caloric restriction in the environment.
Thank you. Moderate caloric restriction in an environment of micronutrient excellence. Thank you. Because any fat on your body is lifespan shortening. You need to have a low body fat percent. So your healthy life expectancy is proportional to the micronutrient per calorie density of your diet. That takes that statement and puts it into a simple equation. You guys understand this better? That means to have a diet that's rich in micronutrients per calorie, you actually have to eat foods that are rich in micronutrients per calorie. That means you have to know what foods have the most micronutrients per calorie, so you can eat more of those foods. But I'm saying the corollary is also true, the opposite is also true here, that the more you eat foods that are empty calories and no nutrients, the more you're shortening your lifespan. So you pour oil on your food, you start eating white bread and pizza and sugar and honey, the more you start eating high-calorie, low-nutrient foods, the more you're shortening your lifespan. You only have one body, and unfortunately, there's biological principles that determine how you age. So, moderate caloric restriction slows the aging process via multiple mechanisms. Right? It enhances free radical, it reduces free radical exposure, it enhances DNA repair, it reduces the amount of the deposition of advanced glycation end products and methylation defects that build up on your DNA, which accumulate sufficiently to cause cancer, and the body has the ability to repair and remove methylation defects when your diet is high in phytochemicals and doesn't consume excessive calories. And of course, we're talking today about the fact that a diet also has to be hormonally favorable to extending the lifespan. But the word I want you to remember on this slide is right at the bottom. It says AGEs. AGEs age us. They stand for advanced glycation end products. And you know how diabetics filled with advanced glycation end products causing blindness, kidney problems, nerve problems. But advanced glycation end products don't just destroy organs in diabetics. They also build up and age us and destroy and make our body not function well and increase our risk of death in people who are not diabetic. We glycate proteins and we age proteins when you overeat calories, and especially when you overeat processed carbohydrates and when you are overweight. Because when you're overweight, you become more insulin resistant. Because fat cells block the uptake of insulin. So the pancreas has to produce more insulin. So when I eat a mango, my body may have to only produce 1 unit of insulin, where the person who's overweight eats that same mango, they need to produce 5 units of insulin. Follow that? I mean, let's say I weigh 150 pounds, and my insulin needs for the whole day about 10 units a day. If I gained 140 to 160 pounds, now for the same diet, instead of requiring 10 units a day, I may require 20 units a day, almost 10 pounds overweight. If I'm 30 pounds overweight, I may require 50 extra units of insulin, just from being 25 pounds overweight. If I'm 70 pounds overweight, I might require 10 times as much insulin, more than 100 units a day, compared to the only 10 units I needed when my body fat was less than 11 to 12%. You follow that? But fat cells don't just raise insulin. Insulin is a angiogenesis promoting hormone. The word angiogenesis means to promote the growth of new blood vessels. See, fat cells secrete angiogenesis promoters. They say, blood vessels grow into me so I can get more oxygen and more nutrients, so I can get bigger. Fat cells secrete hormones to promote their own growth. And the angiogenesis promoters secreted from fat cells increase risk of cancer because cancer cells are promoted by angiogenesis secrete hormones as well. And insulin is an angiogenesis promoting hormone. It's a fat storage hormone that accelerates fat growth and promotes angiogenesis. And fat cells also secrete estrogens. And estrogens, and high level estrogen, increases risk of both breast cancer in women and prostate cancer in males. Follow that? So the body has the ability to reduce free radicals, remove advanced glycation end products, AGEs, remove toxins, slow the metabolic rate, do all these things that decrease our risk of aging and premature death. That reminds me, I'm looking at that statement that says slows the metabolic rate. Maybe I should just explain that a bit, because I bet, I could be wrong, but I bet many of you think it's favorable to increase the metabolic rate. You want your metabolic rate fast so you can eat more food and not get fat. Isn't that true? You guys are very educated. That's right. We want our metabolic rate to be moderately slowed so we can eat less food and not get too thin. Did you follow that? See, humans died throughout human history, mostly for the last 50,000 years, because people couldn't find enough food to eat, so that's why they died. It's only been in recent modern times that people have excess calories around. Now the person who has a genetically slow metabolic rate is metabolically challenged in this high caloric environment because they've become overweight. But had that person lived 30,000 years ago, They would have been the person who could survive the times of famine when it's hard to find food, and of course they're going to age slower, and generally speaking, the less calories we consume, the longer we live. You follow that? We'll go into that later if we have time. So, more vegetables in the diet, less methylation defects. This reminds me of the study done on the Fiji Islanders compared to the Hawaiian Islanders, because the Fiji Islanders smoke like fiends, but they don't have as much lung cancer as the Hawaiian Islanders who don't smoke as much, because the Fiji Islanders eat more green vegetables. The studies show that when you eat more green vegetables, it inhibits the DNA methylation defects accumulating, inhibits the increased lowering risk of cancer, including lung cancer in smokers, including skin cancer in people who's exposed to the sun. In other words, these cancers, even that are not dietary, not naturally dietary induced, like asbestos exposure and all the type of chemical and carcinogenic exposure, are decreased possibility of getting cancer when they have high intake of green vegetables. Green vegetables help the body detoxify from carcinogens and remove carcinogens, because the major cellular machinery that removes carcinogens is part of the antioxidant response element in the cell that's fueled by the NRF2 transcription proteins. And the NRF2 transcription proteins are activated by green cruciferous vegetables more powerfully than any other food. So I mentioned that some foods promote angiogenesis, especially things that raise insulin too high, and some foods, of course, stop angiogenesis. So these foods that stop angiogenesis, lower rate of cancer, and inhibit fat storage in the body. Right? So we'll go into that shortly right now. So we're going into, of course, we discussed already today that green vegetables and vegetable portions per day are linked to reducing heart attack and stroke risk and preventing blood vessel disease from developing. And then this app I'm developing called Nutrient IQ, which will be probably released in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think. Because people, especially college students and young people, can track their points and get NutriCoins and have a fun game of trying to get more nutrients in their diet. And what I'm saying right now is that when you're trying to get more points by eating kale and broccoli and quinoa, and arugula and bok choy, you're getting all these points, trying to score 500 points again, it has the effect to make you want to eat less calories, because you're eating so much bulk and so much high nutrient, low calorie foods. So just showing you some scores here based on the nutrient density per equal amount of calories. Because these foods are all naturally low in calories, they all have less than 100 calories per pound, and you can't fit that many calories in the stomach at one time. The stomach is only a liter when stretched. It can't fit usually more than 400 calories in at a time. It's hard to become overweight when eating natural foods. And I often call these foods unlimited foods. It's about how much you could possibly eat. You could not become overweight if you're eating all these low calories. It would be impossible to become overweight. Like Brussels sprouts and artichokes and asparagus and cooked mushrooms and eggplant, tomatoes and peppers and onions and cauliflower. Eat as much as you want. No way you can become overweight on those foods. You couldn't fit that many calories in at one time. That's how you know. What's so funny? What? Oh, you don't want to joke? That's what I'm going to say? What's that? So that's how you know that Skipper never really lived on that island. You don't know that, let's check out the show. You ever heard of Gilligan's Island?
Yes.
It's a show where the skipper is overweight on the island. They get shipwrecked there for like 20 years on the island. I'm saying if you really lived on the island, you'd never be overweight. But don't forget, of course, that smiling and laughing makes you live longer. The joke can be stupid, it still makes you live longer. It doesn't mean a joke. So I'm talking here about G-bombs, because this acronym G-bombs, standing for greens, and beans, and onions, and mushrooms, and berries, and seeds. What does that mean? What's the whole purpose of G-bombs, and what does it stand for? Well, it just stands for the foods with the most scientific data show that these foods show the most protection against developing later life cancer. that people who eat more of these foods have lower risk of later life cancer. Throw a dart at any of those foods, and we can pull out probably 100 studies showing how protective that one food is against cancer. We'll look at a few of the studies now, just as an overview, at some of the studies on these foods. Let's look at green vegetables, because here's a study with breast cancer patients showing that people who ate a higher amount of green vegetables compared to women who hardly had any had about a 62% reduction in total death from breast cancer over the 10-year period. They followed them. The same thing was true with people with women who had the GSTP1 gene for breast cancer, increasing their risk of breast cancer. Those with a higher intake of green vegetables had a 50% reduction in development of breast cancer. So there's no drug that is this powerful to reduce cancer rates more than 50% compared to eating green cruciferous vegetables. So that's just one study, but I've been saying there's hundreds of studies like that. So let's look at some of the studies on onions, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, that the highest consumer of onions were people who ate at least a quarter cup, between a quarter to a half a cup of raw onion a day. That had about a 50 to 80% reduction in all common cancers. This was a European study. But in any case, we're seeing that onions have very powerful effects against cancer, and that's why over the last 15 years, I've tried to include more onion in my diet and the diet I recommend to people. But before that, I didn't know how protective scallions and leeks and onions were. And onions contain an enzyme called alliinase, A-L-L-I-I-N-A-S-E, alliinase, and that enzyme is heat sensitive. You know when you cut an onion in the kitchen and you cut it closer to the root, it'll make your eyes tear more because there's more of that chemical, the alliinase, is close to the root and towards the skin of the onion. The outer portion of the onion has there's more anti-cancer effects in the onion near the root, near the outer skin. Don't just take the paper off, but don't throw away those inside. Don't be careless and waste some of the onion close to the skin because there's more anti-cancer material there. But what I'm saying right now is that alliinase enzyme is heat sensitive. So I plopped that whole onion in the soup and cooked it, made it soft and mushy, and then blended it into the soup. It would lose some of the formation of the organosulfide compounds that have anti-cancer effects. I have to either eat that onion raw on the salad and chew it up well so the alliinase enzyme forms the anti-cancer organosulfide compound to burn your eyes. It's forming those compounds as you're opening it up. But you want to do that, you don't want to heat it and then do that. You want to make sure it's still there. But how I put the onion into the soup then, and still get the benefit of the anti-cancer benefits of the onion, is I have to blend the raw onion in the blender. So it forms all the compounds first, and then pour it into the soup when it's blended, because now the heating of the soup won't destroy the organosulfide compounds. It will just inhibit their formation if I put it in the soup before I chopped it. Did you follow that? The same thing is true with the myrosinase enzyme in green vegetables. The green cruciferous enzyme, the green cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and broccoli rabe and watercress and arugula and Brussels sprouts and mustard greens and turnip greens and kale, they have that myrosinase in a compartment, in a little package in the cell wall that when you're chewing and you release that packet, it mixes with the glycinolate in the center of the vegetable, forming the ITCs, the isothiocyanates, in your mouth as you're chewing. So that's the word I want you to memorize, ITC, isothiocyanates, because the isothiocyanates, or ITCs in green vegetables, is the most powerful anti-cancer substance in the diet, in the green cruciferous vegetables. You should be aware of the most powerful anti-cancer ingredient in your diet, and that's the green cruciferous vegetables. Am I tiring you guys out? Now, mushrooms are an integral part of the human immune system because they're powerful angiogenesis inhibitors. Remember I told you what angiogenesis promoters were? Well, mushrooms say, no way, Jose. Not putting fat on your body, say it in Spanish, no way, Jose. And they also have aromatase inhibitors. You guys know what aromatase inhibitors are, like tamoxifen is an aromatase inhibitor. Mushrooms are natural aromatase inhibitors with specific effects on inhibiting estrogenic stimulation of breast tissue. That's powerfully protective against breast cancer. They also have antigen-binding lectins, which means they help the immune system recognize abnormal cells. So your immune system can then attack and remove cells that are abnormal before they can become cancerous. That's called apoptosis. The body killing its own cells before the cell can have damage hurt you, right? So mushrooms have multiple mechanisms. In other words, they're not particularly at the top of the scale with regard to their micronutrient density, but as far as containing protective phytochemicals, superheroes, right? And then berries have powerful anti-cancer effects. They have an effect even to reverse precancerous lesions. And they have anti-diabetic effects because they're so powerfully promoting the favorable bacterial lining of the digestive tract that slows the absorption of glucose. In other words, berries like strawberries and blackberries and raspberries may taste sweet, but even though they taste sweet and have a low amount of sugar in them, that sugar doesn't get absorbed that easily from a berry because they thicken the biofilm, the coat the villi, inhibiting the absorption of glucose, not just from the berry, but from other foods in the diet as well. The foods with the most ability to thicken the biofilm are beans, because beans have the most resistant starch. And I already told you earlier today that resistant starch is not degradable by enzymes. It has to be broken down by bacteria in the gut, and it's a powerful prebiotic that excites and promotes the growth of healthy bacteria that adhere to the lining of the villi, they live there permanently when you're a regular eater of beans. That's why a person who eats beans every day all the time doesn't get a lot of gas from eating beans. They hardly get any gas in them, they don't get any gas from eating beans. Whereas a person who eats beans once in a while gets bloating and gassy from eating beans because they haven't built up all the beneficial bacteria and they haven't thickened the biofilm with those bacteria because you're not a regular consumer of beans. And what I'm saying to you right now is the thickened biofilm with the type of bacteria that live there because you're a regular consumer of beans will now lower the glycemic effect of any food you eat that's not a bean, that's even not a bean. And doesn't even have to be in the meal when you ate the beans. And scientists call that the second meal effect. And what they mean by the second meal effect is whatever you eat the next morning or the next day, because you're a regular bean eater, the glycemic effect of that food is reduced because your biofilm has been made more favorable because you regularly consume beans. Did you follow that? Yeah. So this slide is talking about lignans in flax seeds and chia seeds. Flax seeds have the most lignans of any food. Flax seeds have about 21 milligrams per tablespoon. That's about 7 milligrams per teaspoon. And what did the study show? It followed women who had breast cancer for 10 years, and it showed that those women eating a third of 1 milligram of lignan a day on the average in their diet had a 71 decreased risk of death from breast cancer over that 10-year period. That's just a third of a milligram. A teaspoon has 7 milligrams. And that's after they got a diagnosis of breast cancer. Now you guys must realize that the effect of the intervention is more powerful the younger in life you do it, and especially before cancer develops. As the cancer develops and becomes more advanced, the effect of the intervention lessens and lessens and lessens. But even in women who have breast cancer, you still saw a powerful effect in reducing risk of 71%. Utterly amazing. Don't forget, because breast cancer is usually diagnosed 10 to 15 years after it first appeared. Let me make that clear. That the doubling time of breast cancer is about 120 days on the average, which means that the time that little coalesced nodule of cells is large enough to be seen by the human eye, it's by a mammogram or even a MRI, it's probably been there at least 10 or 15 years. So when you get a diagnosis of breast cancer by your physician, that's not an early diagnosis. That cancer's been there for decades already, right? We now have the newest technology besides stem cell in medicine is the ability to detect cancer in the bloodstream called blood biopsies now. We're getting these new tests developing in the next 3 to 5 years that can actually diagnose breast cancer about 10 years before a mammogram can. Did you follow that? So now we have the opportunity to tell women that that almost all women in the age of 60 already have cancer. In other words, there'll be a smaller population of men and women who are over the age of 60 who don't have cancer. What good is making everybody afraid? There's no good in diagnosing all these cancers if we don't have any way to help these people anyway. My point here is that nutritional excellence becomes so much more important now, because in the next decade, we're going to find out that most adults already have cancer, and we're not going to be cutting off every person's breasts. We're not going to be taking out every man's prostate. And we're not going to be giving them all chemotherapy with early stage cancers that are way earlier than we have to give them nutrition, nutritional excellence, which has already been proven to be able to reverse early stage cancers. It even reverses some later stage cancers. But of course, it becomes more bizarre and unpredictable the later you get. With most men with early stage prostate cancer, it goes away. So now the second principle of the vegetarian diet is your diet has to be hormonally favorable. We started to discuss this already, didn't we? And discussed how extra estrogen produced by the fat cells increases the risk of cancer, right? We discussed how excess insulin promotes angiogenesis, right? And insulin is a fat storage hormone that promotes cellular replication and growth. And we started to discuss IGF-1, or insulin-like growth factor 1, which also binds to the insulin receptor as a growth hormone that we need when we're growing up, when we're growing as a child. But excess growth hormone when we're an adult promotes the growth of things that shouldn't be growing. Bad things that shouldn't grow. And lower levels of IGF-1 are linked to slowing the aging process and slowing the brain aging and maintaining your full mental faculties with aging. I should mention, though, that yes, higher levels of IGF-1 are dangerous. But also, levels of IGF-1 that are too low can be dangerous too. You know, we need some insulin, we need some estrogen, but the problem is, in the modern world, the vast majority of people have way too much of this stuff in them. Their diet is causing way too many hormones. Now, the thing you have to know here is, of course, is that sugar predominantly raises insulin, and animal protein is the nutrient that predominantly raises IGF-1, or insulin growth factor 1. Sugar can raise IGF-1, and protein can raise insulin, but sugar is stronger raising insulin, and protein is stronger raising IGF-1. Now, the word glycemic load refers to how fast the glucose enters the bloodstream. So it could be the same 200 calories of glucose, but if it came in 10 minutes, that's a higher glycemic load. If it was a bean, and it came in over a 3 or 4 hour period, the same 200 calories of glucose, that's called a low glycemic carbohydrate. Did you follow that? Because it enters the bloodstream so slowly, the pancreas doesn't have to produce much insulin to take it out of the bloodstream. When you eat a food that's a high glycemic load and it floods the bloodstream very rapidly, then the pancreas is forced to produce a huge amount of insulin, and that insulin stays circulating for hours, much longer than the glucose stays circulating. The danger is the high insulin circulating a long time, more than the high glucose circulating a long time. That's why type 1 diabetics die so young, because doctors allow them to eat foods that are so glycemically unfavorable, and they cover that with excessive amounts of insulin. They don't say to them, I'm only going to allow you to have 20 units of insulin a day. You're only going to get 10 units of long-acting and 3 units of short-acting with each meal. And now you have to figure out a diet that's going to keep your sugars low without using more than that much insulin. You follow what I just said? If the type 1 diabetic was forced to keep their sugars favorable while they maintained their insulin within the biological range of normal people, they'd be able to live to be 100 years old. But now we kill off the type 1 diabetics because the diabetologists and endocrinologists allow them to do anything they want and just cover it with insulin. As if the sugar being high is the only bad part, not the insulin being high too. You follow what I said? So glycemic load increases risk of heart disease and cancer and gallbladder disease and dementia. And high glycemic load foods are things that are generally white, like white flour and white potato, and chocolate cake is white, it's just as a fake tan with chocolate cake. I always say, the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. You can't trust things that are too white. Cocaine, cigarettes, right, all this. And moderate glycemic load foods like sweet potato and oats and wheat and mangoes and tropical fruits and corn. I don't recommend brown rice anymore in the United States at all. I don't recommend people any brown rice in their diet because the brown rice is contaminated with arsenic, because the hull of the rice, the kernel of the rice, Because white rice is not contaminated with arsenic, it's the brown rice, because the hull of the kernel sucks up arsenic like a sponge and attracts arsenic more than any other food does. And we fertilize our rice patties with chicken manure, and they have fed the arsenic to chicken, and there's also, flame retardant chemicals in there, and it's hard to get rice that's not contaminated. Brown rice is more contaminated than white rice, and white rice is, of course, very glycemic. So I don't really recommend rice, but other people eat quinoa and other grains that are not rice-based. And of course, the lower glycemic foods like apples and citrus fruits and beans and non-tropical fruits and squashes and root vegetables are really astonishingly low glycemic. So how do you turn a moderate glycemic load food into a low glycemic load food? Right, you eat beans. You got it. There are actually 4 foods that have the most powerful effect at lowering the glycemic effect of your diet because they fit in the microbiome. Now, beans do, and that is the 2 cooked foods are beans and mushrooms. We recommend mushrooms cooked, not raw, because even cooking them for a minute blows off the agarotine, which is a mild carcinogen in the raw mushrooms. Even a minute of cooking blows off the agarotine. And the 2 foods raw, which you probably got this already. The 2 raw foods that are best for sticking in the microbiome are raw onion and raw cruciferous green vegetables, right? And we talked about the onions, raw onion mostly raw. If you are going to cook it, chop it well, blend it before it gets cooked. If I'm making that anti-cancer soup, I'm taking the mustard greens, the collards, the kale, I'm putting it in my blender, I'm ladling just a little liquid in there, I'm blending it up while it's raw, and then I'm going to pour it as my soup. Right? And then I'm going to take my leek and my scallion and my onion and put it in the blender with just a little liquid there, not too much liquid, you don't want to leak the chemical reaction. It's like a chemistry set, and making the anti-cancer nutrients. I'm going to blend my onions in there, and I'm going to turn the blender on, make a stink in the kitchen, and pour that into the soup too. And then I'm going to clean the blender and put it away. The mushrooms I can chop up, and the parsnips and carrots I can chop up in little chunks and pieces, and the beans don't have to be blended, but the onion and the green vegetables are blended because they contain heat-sensitive enzymes, right? And then we're also trying to eat a salad every day. My other mantra is the salad is the main dish. I want you to do a big salad at least once a day and put the raw onion and the raw cruciferous on a salad and try to chew it really well to get those chemicals formed in the mouth. Because the chemicals formed in the mouth when you're eating green vegetables and onions also raises the production of nitric oxide in the body too, which helps your blood vessels and helps lower your blood pressure, has other beneficial effects on longevity. You want to eat some raw food and you want to chew that food. So the glycemic effect I'm demonstrating in this slide now, that if we put carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale of quality, we see the beans are at the top. Because they have the most micronutrients, they have the most fiber, they have the most resistant starch, and they have the most inositol pentachous phosphate, which doesn't allow cancers to grow. And no inositol pentachous phosphate is powerfully anti-cancer because it's 26 letters long. Right, peas and lentils have the most, you add up the starch and fiber, and you guys might know that term called free sugar. It means the glucose related to the fiber content. You know what I mean? We want to take in foods that have sweetness or have carbohydrate, and a lot of fiber with them, because it's the sugar without the fiber that's dangerous. The fiber mitigates or lessens the absorption of sugar and makes the sugar no longer harmful. Let's say the sugar and the fiber are equal, the sugar doesn't bother you. When the sugar comes in with no fiber, like in honey or maple syrup or in white flour, that sugar or carbohydrate becomes a problem. So we're saying here that beans are very powerfully shown in scientific studies to powerfully protect against cancer. In the Nurses' Health Study done in Boston, they found that women who ate beans 3 or more times a week had a 36% lower risk of developing breast cancer compared to women who didn't eat beans. And beans were the food with the most powerful association with lower rate of breast cancer. Why did that study show that beans were the most powerful preventing breast cancer, not green vegetables? Why, if I'm saying that green vegetables are even more powerful preventing breast cancer than beans are, how can that study show beans were more powerful? Because in Boston, women weren't eating enough green vegetables to have that effect, but they did eat beans. They just they couldn't find enough women who were eating large amounts of green vegetables. Whereas they did the Asian studies, where they found women who were eating more green vegetables, obviously we found that green vegetables were more powerful than beans. Follow that? So IGF-1, we're talking about these hormonally sensitive issues, that IGF-1, lower levels extends lifespan as long as it doesn't get too low. In the average American, blood level for IGF-1 runs around 250. I presume it's around the same thing here, between 200 and 275 is usually an average IGF-1 level. Marathon runners are average around 175, vegans average around 150. Ideally, you want your IGF-1 to average between like 110 and 160, the normal range. If we look at the elderly, some people, as they get older, they lose the ability to digest protein efficiently, and their IGF-1 could drop too low. And that also could be a risk factor for increasing the risk of death from dropping too low. You see, where a nutritarian diet shines, and I'm calling the diet style I recommended with a full portfolio of anti-cancer food, a nutritarian diet, because it's rich in nutrients, it's also relatively rich in plant protein, because it contains hemp seeds and green vegetables and beans, and because it's seeds and beans and nuts and greens, it's a relatively high protein plant-based diet. So it's safe for a toddler or an elderly person, because they're still getting a good amount of protein and fat. Whereas a lot of these high carbohydrate, low-fat vegan diets promoted by some popular vegan gurus are not favorable for toddlers and the elderly, because it could be dangerous for a toddler, not for lack of growth and lack of fat and protein, and also not lifespan favorable to the elderly, as their ability to digest protein goes down at the age of 75. Did you follow that now? What I'm saying? I mean, those low-fat vegan diets are also dangerous for other reasons as well, because a lot of these low-fat vegan gurus aren't recommending people supplement with EPA and DHA. And about half of people are insufficient EPA and DHA in a vegan diet. About a quarter of the vegan population not supplementing with EPA or DHA can develop severe DHA deficiencies, leading to brain shrinkage and dementia in later life, or depression, or postpartum depression, or major depression in middle life. So we have to be careful that we don't take chances with people's brains. So we're talking about IGF-1, and we're talking here about animal products because their high protein concentration raise IGF-1. Dairy products particularly high, especially milk over cheese. Milk is worse than cheese at raising IGF-1. Yogurt and cheese aren't as bad as just drinking milk out of a bottle. And, of course, plant protein, plant produce. Even when a high-protein plant food like hemp seeds or black beans or edamame, which are high in protein, why doesn't the protein in plant foods raise IGF-1 like the protein from animal products did? What?
Fiber?
Fiber? Not really.
Because it's not the same it's not from mammals, I guess.
It's not from animals, yeah, but I want more specific information. That's not enough.
Saturated fat amino acids.
Yes. What's that?
Saturated fat.
No, it's a type of amino acids. It has to do with the amino acids from animal products that are more biologically complete. They enter the bloodstream in a bolus, which means all at once. And when they enter the bloodstream all at once, they're biologically complete as they enter the bloodstream, and the body then converts them into hormones. Or it tries to produce urea or ammonia. The body has to make urea and uric acid and get rid of the extra nitrogen in the body, so it somewhat interferes with brain function. But it takes those excess amount of biologically complete hormones and turns it into excess amounts of hormone. Can you follow that? Because we learned in grade school that what made the animal products biologically favorable was their amino acids were biologically complete. Remember that? So it made for better growth in rats. But now we know that the animals that grow the fastest die the youngest. And if we can measure how a woman's going to die younger by the age she goes through puberty, if you feed her so she gets a lot of acne and develops menstruation and breast tissue when she's 10 years old, she's going to be at increased risk of breast cancer in a short life. We want her to develop her menstrual periods and her shapely body later on, when she's 16, 17, or 18 years old, not when she's 10 or 11 or 12. So we want to feed a person, we don't want to feed to maximize their maturity. Did you follow that? So what I'm saying here, when you eat plant proteins, they're not as biologically complete, but the body has to make them biologically complete so it can make the hormones it needs. But do you think the body's going to overshoot do you think the body's going to take incomplete proteins now and make them biologically complete much more than it needs? Of course not. It's just going to biologically complete the amount it needs. Did you follow that? So it'll mix and match stored amino acids. It'll absorb some bacteria from the digestive tract to the complete amino acids. It'll even absorb epithelial lining. The squamous cell epithelium will be absorbed as those cells are swept into the chine of the digestive tract. You eat some of your own body. You eat some of the bacteria as protein. You absorb protein that's lining the villi from other amino acids that are stored from other foods. The body can take these non-complete amino acids and make them biologically complete, sufficient to make the muscle demand and hormonal demands it needs to make its stuff it needs to make. But it's not going to overshoot it. Did you follow me? Animal products enable us to overshoot the amount of hormones we need. And then we promote cancer. We promote excessive growth. The shortest lived people in North America are linebackers on NFL football teams because they had to be between 200 and 350 pounds to get that job. And they had to eat a lot of animal products to get to that level of bigness. So here's a review of 17 prospective studies on breast cancer and IGF-1. There's no controversy. I think that all nutritional scientists worldwide recognize that high and right levels of IGF-1 link to breast cancer. So if you just want to check your IGF-1 level, you can tell your risk of breast cancer. And there's no controversy. No studies ever showed that it was not true. Yes?
Dr. Joel, what were you saying is the ideal IGF-1 level? You mentioned in the US it's 250 and that vegans are 150, but where would you pitch an ideal level?
Probably between like 90 and 160, something like that,
All right, thank you.
90, 170, somewhere in that range. Certainly want to be below 175. So here's a study following 43,000 women for more than 15 years. And they rated how much animal protein the woman was eating. If she was on a vegan diet, they gave her a 1. If she was like an Atkins high paleo diet, they gave her a 20. And every woman got scored on a 1 to 20 score based on how many animal products they were eating. But here's the thing, is why do I give more credence to one study or certain studies and not other studies that may show that it's okay to eat eggs? How do I know that study is good or bad? Because I can give you a Twinkie diet. You know what Twinkies are? Or a cookie. Just give you nothing but Twinkies. But you'll get sick of eating Twinkies. You're like, after a while, you can't eat them anymore. And you probably start taking less calories, and you'll actually lose a little weight, your listeners will go down. But the only problem with the Twinkie diet is you die 20 years before you were supposed to. You did lose weight, but temporarily over the short term, it looked good on the Twinkie diet. What I'm saying to you right now is in order to give a study more credence, we have to look at a study that looks at hard endpoints, like death. Death is a good hard endpoint, right? Or cancer, or heart attack rates. Those are hard endpoints. You give a study more credence, and you give a study more credence that has thousands of people in it, and you give a study more credence that goes on for decades looking at hard endpoints. You follow me? And when you look at every study that goes on for decades, looks at hard endpoints with thousands of people, we find the same thing. More animal products, more death. More cardiovascular death, and more cancer death. This study showed an increase in cardiovascular death of 5% increased death for every 2 points of increased animal product consumption from 1 to 20. About a 60% increased risk of cardiovascular death, people with a score over 16 compared to a score below 10. Study because obviously these people eat a lot of vegetables. But here's the thing to remember on this slide in the study. The thing to remember is that the longevity effects did not level off. It didn't get, the top of the graph didn't get flat. When you look at the mushroom effect flattens out after people eat like 10 or 20 grams of mushrooms. Consuming more mushrooms don't keep you making living longer. Do you follow that? A little bit goes a long way. Same with tomatoes and sweet potato. The only food that showed a continuation of the longevity effects were green vegetables. It almost said there was no topping of the level. Just the more you eat, the longer they live on the green vegetables. Okay, going on to nuts and seeds. Because nuts and seeds are linked to longer life in every study that was ever shown. In other words, I sent Dr. Dean Ornish. You know Dr. Dean Ornish? I sent Dean Ornish 100 studies over the last 2 years, showing him 100 different studies that showed that more nuts in the diet made for less cardiovascular deaths. Because he wasn't recommending nuts and seeds in his cardiovascular reversal diet, right? And he was a nice guy, and he was talking to me about it, and he was, I said, Joel, keep sending me those studies, it's interesting. So I said, Dean, I've been doing cardiovascular reversal, same as you, for more than 30 years. I give people nuts and seeds, and reversing them, reversing severe advanced heart disease in every single case. You don't have to stop people from eating a walnut. So I wrote the book, The End of Heart Disease, and I wrote in the book that Dr. Ornish must think an egg white is better for a heart patient than a walnut, because he allows egg whites in his diet, but he doesn't allow people to have walnuts. Yet the data and the meta-analysis on the most recent studies show the lack of nuts in the diets increased cardiovascular death, and conclusively they're better for heart patients. And before I sent the book to the publisher, I wanted him to read it and approve it, so he didn't think I was like hitting him in the back door or something, doing something that. So he read it, he got back to me, and he said, "I'm changing my dietary recommendations, and I'm putting nuts and seeds in my program. So just don't take it out of the book and write down. I agree with you." So I convinced him. I can't say the same is true for other people. Names not to be mentioned. But in any case, what I'm saying here is every major study, not sponsored by nut companies, every major study show the same thing, that more nuts in the diet made longer life. And actually, Adventist Health Study 1 showed that those vegans who were low-fat vegans who did not eat nuts and seeds, not only didn't live as long as the vegans who ate nuts and seeds, because you need some fat in your diet to facilitate the absorption of the phytochemicals that prevent cancer from the green vegetables and the tomatoes and stuff. In other words, you only absorb about 1/10 as much of the antioxidants and anti-cancer nutrients from the salad and the vegetable dish if you had it with no nuts and seeds and no fat content in that meal. Do you follow what I just said? But what I'm saying right now is not only did it show that those vegans who were low-fat vegans who ate nuts and seeds, not only did they not live as long, but those that ate animal products and ate nuts and seeds lived longer than the vegans who didn't eat nuts and seeds. Did you find that? And then, oh, by the way, I think I have a slide on that. I think it's coming up. Yeah, the vegans who ate nuts and seeds lived the longest. And here's the thing, in the Adventist Health Study 2, there's that study I showed Dr. Ornish, where I showed him that, I sent him that study with my book, over 350,000 people, up to 44,000 deaths, showing increasing cardiovascular mortality by not having fat, nuts, and seeds in the diet. How, you know what I mean? So that one study is enough to be convincing that large numbers of people, many years, hard endpoints, right on nuts and seeds. But in any case, and it showed a 40% decreased cardiovascular mortality from people eating nuts and seeds in the diet. You still have these people telling people not to eat nuts and seeds, right? Because their egos, or their personalities, whatever it is, they can't change their views, so they tell people fast. But okay, so here in 2018, the study comes out. In March of 2018, the Adventist Health Study 2, listen to this one. It shows that people, Seventh-day Adventists, who are the most longest-lived Americans, within Loma, California, they generated 10 years longer than any of the most other Americans, and other Caucasian Californians, that those Seventh-day Adventists who ate meat had a higher amount of meat consumption, had a 60% increased mortality, increased death rate, and those with the highest intake of nuts and seed had a 40% lower death rate and lower cardiovascular mortality compared to those with the lowest intake of nuts and seeds. So they showed a difference of 40% in cardiovascular mortality among Seventh-day Adventists who mostly don't eat much animal products, who mostly are plant-based. Do you follow this? That's a tremendous number, 40% increased cardiovascular mortality, low intake of nuts and seeds compared to higher intake. It just demonstrates that a lot of the gurus in the vegan community are giving people improper advice over the last 20 years, having people try to avoid fat. Fat is not the enemy. Going back to some slides we skipped here, this just shows more nuts and seeds, more cholesterol lowering, which we discussed the ability of cereals and stanols to bind fat and pull it out to the stool and to attract oxidized LDL. And we discussed this one now. And now, of course, the point is a nutritarian diet that I'm recommending might be somewhat different from a conventional vegan diet because there's more beans, more greens, more nuts and seeds, and maybe less rice and potato. You follow that? And by the way, I noticed you said Dr. Greger and Dr. Clapper are coming here, and Dr. Greger and Dr. Clapper really are in agreement with all these principles. And I kind of, over the years, I've been doing this a long time. I remember when Dr. Greger was in the audience in my lectures, and Dr. Clapper, I've known these people for many, many years, and they've been exposed to this information, and they come, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've mentored a lot of physicians who told me that I've really changed their careers and accepted passion about using nutrition and excited about, and had them actually change the trajectory of their career because they've been exposed to this information. So more greens, more beans, more nuts and seeds means it lowers the glycemic effect of your diet. You follow me? Because if you're eating more of these foods, you're eating less of some other higher glycemic carbohydrate. So the Nutrient food pyramid has vegetables at the base of the pyramid. Why would you put grains at the base of the pyramid? If you put vegetables, shouldn't you put the healthiest food at the base of the pyramid? So here's the thing. Wouldn't you agree that a dietary portfolio containing more healthy foods is healthier than a dietary portfolio with less healthy foods? Wouldn't that make sense? That just eating rice or white potato with all in green vegetables and onions and flax seeds or whatever, is not going to be as healthy as one that's richer in more anti-cancer, more high-nutrient food. So a nutritarian eats a variety of high-nutrient plants, tries to reduce or remove those empty-calorie foods like sugar, sweetener, white flours, and processed foods and fast foods. Now, you know how you make a diet really cause cancer? You mix together foods that raise insulin with, at the same meal, foods that raise IGF-1. You put together a high glycemic carbohydrate with a slab of animal protein, like spaghetti and meatballs, or pizza, or fish and chips, or something, or ham and cheese, and you put together a sandwich with white bread and some meat in the middle, right? I always say that diet's been designed by ISIS. I was on PBS, and PBS television in the United States, and doing my television show. And I sit on there, I showed the food pyramid in the United States, and shows 60% of processed foods, and 35% of animal products, and like 5% natural plants. And I say, that diet's designed by Al-Qaeda, this is years ago, so they cut it out. I don't know why they cut it out, why did they say that? But they cut it and made it to me sound so stupid, they dubbed in my voice, and it says on television, that diet's been designed by Darth Vader. It's not even funny. I'm so embarrassed. That's not my joke! Now when you take an oil, and you heat an oil up in a fast food restaurant, of course, and you cook the oil at high heat for hours, and you fry a french fry or a donut in it, that would be forming more rancidity, more carcinogenic compounds that form that oil. So the studies show that even one serving of commercial fast food french fries a week increases risk, one a week. People say, moderately, have yourself moderately. Well, one serving a week increases risk of breast cancer by 26%. Just one serving a week. These things are particularly dangerous. They even show increased risks of cancer in people working in fast food restaurants who's inhaling the smoke who don't eat the food off the fryers. So here's a study done in the medical journal Cell Metabolism showing people following a vegetarian diet for 6 weeks only dropped LDL cholesterol by 33%. But they didn't just drop LDL cholesterol by 33%. The high level of antioxidants and phytochemicals wiped out oxidized LDL. It's a type of LDL. Plus, it didn't just affect LDL. It also caused their blood pressure to drop, caused their less intravascular inflammation, body fat levels fell. In other words, there's too many different mechanisms, so many different mechanisms via which it's going to be protected. So you can't compare the benefits of a nutritarian diet to a statin drug. And statin drugs, of course, have side effects.
So when you say low-fat vegan, you mean no-nuts vegan?
When I say the low-fat vegan,
vegetarian.
Low-fat vegetarian, yes. Person trying to keep their vegetarian diet, lower fat by either excluding oil and nuts and seeds. The nutritarian diet uses nuts and seeds, getting more beneficial cholesterol effects and other effects, absorbing more phytochemical antioxidants that have anti-cancer effects as well. Less inflammation, the blood into all the blood vessels, because you're absorbing more of the ITCs from green vegetables, and you're absorbing more of the anti-inflammatory mediators, which are some of them are fat soluble. Without the fat, without eating some walnuts or some pecans or some nuts for the salad, you're not absorbing all the beneficial nutrients. Here's a study on 443 people following a vegetarian diet, lowering their systolic blood pressure on average 26 points in 6 months. And most of them stopped the medication. Of course, we find that most people can stop the medication within 2 weeks on a vegetarian diet. I have a new retreat in California where I take people with high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and they come in and they stay there 4 to 8 weeks. Excuse me, they stay 8 to 12 weeks. And I keep them there that long because just like a drug rehab center keeps people 12 weeks, it takes a long time for a lot of food addicts, a lot of sugar addicts, to lose their emotional, not just the physical attraction, but to lose the emotional attachment to eating sweets. And we're able to train them and go into their problems with their life and go into a lot of the issues why they use food for emotional needs. And we're able to really send them out with less risk of having them go back to drugs, which is their drug is food. You know what I mean? So then we can they drop 50 pounds, but then they get rid of diabetes, they get discharged with no high blood pressure medication, no cholesterol drugs, and no diabetic, they're non-diabetic, but the whole point is to keep them on the plan. Keep them doing it and wanting to do it and enjoying doing it. And I'm making this radical claim, and I published this in the Medical Journal Article 2, to show that people enjoy this way of eating, and they like it as much or better than their old diet, if they stay doing it for at least 5 or 6 months. If they're just doing it for a month, they may still like their old diet better, and they may feel they're requiring some willpower, and they're not eating all the foods they would have liked to eat. But once they learn all the recipes, and once their taste gets stronger, and their smell gets stronger, and their taste buds adapt, then they eventually like this way of eating just as much as their old diet. So it's convincing them that it's worth the effort to go through that 6-month period to then get to that place where they like it just as much. For what? 20 years of life with no medications, without having a chest trouble, without being in a nursing home, with a stroke, without getting cancer. The benefits are huge here. It's worth a little bit changing the way you want to eat for a short period of time. So the nutritarian prescription is at least half a cup of beans a day, and we recommend people make a giant pot of soup on the weekend, or a chili or a stew with beans in it, because we make it on the weekend, and I put this big pot of soup into the refrigerator on Sunday night, and then on Monday morning it's cold, and I can put it into like 10 different containers and have my lunch made for the whole week. I have a bowl of soup, a big salad with a dressing I made on the weekend too, and then I have a piece of fruit for dessert, and I have my lunches made for the entire week, because it's all made on Sunday when I make a big pot of soup. And I'm usually at least 3 fresh fruits a day, and at least 1.5 ounces of raw nuts and seeds a day, at least 1 large salad a day, some steamed or wok greens every day too, and some mushrooms or onions every day as well. These are this is the prescription essentially. Right? And I'm running a study on this. I'm on the faculty of the Health Science Division at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona, where we have 2,500 women enrolled in the study. We're following this prescription every day to prevent breast cancer. Our goal is to get 10,000 women enrolled. But right now we have 2,500 enrolled. You guys can't enroll because we have to, in the United States to do the study. So I'm giving this lecture there, I'm saying women want to join the study, they can join the study, and wherever you live, you can join the study, you just got to pledge to meet this way. And we'll track you over 20 years. So what I'm saying here is that it's not just living longer, it's you have your full mental and physical faculties intact. You can enjoy your life as you age. I mean, what happens is people get older, they call it the golden years. They're not that golden. Right? Their memory is gone, they live in a nursing home, they can't do the things they did when they were younger, they can't do sports, they can't be active, they lose their enjoyment of life, and they get depressed. Let me say this clearly. The studies show that the consumption of fast food and commercial baked goods like bread and croissant and pizza doubles the risk of developing depression. 51% increased risk of developing depression compared to women or to men, both sexes, who don't eat those white flour products. Let me say that one more time. Repeat that again. The study looked at commercial baked goods made of white flour or fast food consumption and found that 2 servings a week, just 2 servings a week of white flour or fast food, had an increased risk of developing depression by 51%. Got that now? Okay, now, the people who don't get depressed eating fast food and commercial baked goods more than 2 times a week, or 5 or 6 or 10 times a week, well, those people, just because they're not getting depressed, doesn't mean it's not making them more moody and more dysthymic and less happy. You follow that? Just because you don't get depressed doesn't mean it's not making you more negative. And dysthymic syndrome, it's called, where like half depressed or a quarter depressed, is like the majority of people that are, they're just not. So you lose brain function, you lose intelligence, you lose creativity, and you lose emotional excitement about your life and your potential positive thoughts about your own future. And of course, you're like a medic. You go into doctor to doctor. You have to go to the doctors all the time. Being on drugs, being on medications, you have side effects, and very often you're taking multiple drugs. And the doctor's seeing you each time they see you. You're getting sicker and sicker, and they're giving you more drugs and more drugs. What I'm saying here is that a vegetarian diet doesn't just make you live longer. It makes you feel free and less fear of disease, and more happy and more excited about life and what you can do with your life, what you can accomplish as you get older too. Gives you a whole different outlook on life. It's worth it. Let's look at some cases now. Here's Tom, faced with a foot amputation, diabetic foot infections. His podiatrist was going to amputate his foot, front of his foot. And Tom started crying in the doctor's office. And so finally, when he was starting to crying, the doctor said to him, well, you know what? There's this guy downstairs named Steve, who follows like Dr. Fuhrman's diet, who lost 80 pounds. This doctor now said, maybe go see him, maybe he can help you. He wasn't even going to mention it until the guy started crying. True story, by the way. So of course he loses 80. This guy also loses about 120 pounds and gets rid of his diabetes and and saves his foot. He's walking again. Now I'm showing you Emily she lost about 120 pounds in 1 year. How much better? So look at her face. Look at even her skin tone and her skin texture and the penetration of phytochemicals in the skin. That's just 1 year later. And you can see how much younger people look and how much slower they age. They're actually aging backwards because they're so much healthier. Here's Skylar, lost 300 pounds, and he thought he got to his best weight at 182. He wasn't trying to lose weight anymore, but he continued to just want to eat healthfully. He lost more weight. He got down to 175. He said, I'm not about to go weight. And the thing about these people is they're not just doing it to lose weight. They're doing it because they were convinced this is the healthiest and best way to eat for their life and for their happiness. And for their later life goals they want to accomplish. So it's not a diet per se, and not using that terminology, because anything you do short term is of no benefit if you gain the weight back. So you can't, so it has to be you have to fully educate a person to why they should eat this way for the rest of their life. Why we eat this way even if we're not overweight. It's the healthiest way to eat. It's the most fun way to eat. It's the most delicious way to eat because our taste buds get stronger as our smell gets stronger, as our sight gets better, as our body gets healthier. The food tastes better, and we learn to like this diet style better, too. It happens. There's John Pelikowski. He's the guy on the right. That's his Oh, he's the guy on the left. Excuse me. But that picture was taken many, many years ago. Well, it was taken in 1994. When he was 72. Now he's much younger. He's 97. Back then he had 3 medications to lower his blood pressure. But then a year later, his blood pressure was off blood pressure medications, and his blood pressure started to eventually go down. In years he was on the diet, his blood pressure kept going down. The older he got, the longer the years he followed the diet. You follow that? So he came to me where he just saw the cardiologist who did a stress test, which was abnormal. And the cardiologist said he needed an angioplasty. He needed stent placement, cardiac catheterization stent placement. And I said, John, just give me 3 months, and I'll show you that we can get your stress test to improve sufficiently in just 3 months, so the cardiologist will see an improvement and won't want to place the stent. And in those days, I didn't even tell them that I didn't tell them that stents don't extend lifespan, they don't prevent future heart attack failures, they don't prevent future low risk of heart attack in your future. They treat the area of the heart with the most oldest calcified plaque that's obstructed. It's not the juvenile or vulnerable plaque, it's the risk of heart disease. They don't lower your risk of heart disease. Now you're putting on a clot-busting drug the rest of your life, increasing your risk of having a hemorrhagic stroke, So stents increase your risk of death, unless it's done in an emergency situation, of course. But in any case, I didn't even tell them that. I just said, let's not do the stent because I can get you well without it. So here he is, what, 20 years later? 72, 82, 92, 25 years later, right? He's 25 years later in better shape, better shape, chopping wood, working in his backyard, He's old. You're going to get these people to die. Some of these patients are so old. Here's a guy, here's a couple, Steve and Tara. Now, see the 226, 447? That meant Tara weighed 226, Steve weighed 447. It says 80, that means Tara lost 80 pounds the first year. Steve lost 220 pounds that year one. Wow, imagine that, 220 in 1 year. Not a typo. And their daughter Chloe, I think their 10-year-old daughter lost 32 pounds and got rid of her asthma. But look at them, like a different people, He of course got rid of his diabetes and his sleep apnea. She got rid of depression, her allergies, her sinus infections, between the two of them, like 10 diseases melted away. But you know what's really thrilled about this, really super thrilled? The dog! He finally has some room to sit in the car. How do you know that? All right, so the Nutritional Research Foundation is where I do some of that research that we're doing that supports the research. My website is drfuhrman.com where you get more information. And I have some books, and my book, The End of Dieting, is the book that goes into the most about food addiction and emotional overeating for people who are on and off diets, have trouble with dietary recidivism. And of course, The End of Heart Disease, The End of Diabetes, designed for those conditions, and my Eat to Live cookbook, based on my most famous book called Eat to Live, and Superimmunity touches more about the G-bombs and about the anti-cancer effects, but just thought I'd show you some of the books.